Okay, we're now recording.
Okay, sounds great. Well, welcome everyone. This is a work session meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. And we have a few work session items today. The first of which is a staffing plan change discussion from the Clerk Auditor's Department. Is someone there to lead this item?
I can go ahead and start. This is Josh Daniels from the Clerk Auditor's Office. So a little bit of background here on this request. During the 2020 budget cycle in 2019, last year, our office identified the need to increase our level of service to the county, to the commission, in terms of finance and budgeting. And so we had asked at the time for a budget manager position, a senior level accounting position, and then what we characterized at the time as an internal auditor position. Actually, I'd asked for two of those sort of junior entry level internal audit positions. And so then the commission approved three of those four positions: a senior level accounting, budget manager, and internal audit position. Given coronavirus and the hiring freeze that took place in the county, we have only hired one of those three positions. So we got an exception to hire a budget manager earlier this year, but have not yet had added to our staffing plan the senior level accounting position or the internal audit position. That's actually given us some time to really think deeply and strategically about what our office does, what the county needs, and how best to organize that office. And so this ask reflects that process and also includes some of those positions we had asked for. So in this particular agenda item, what we're doing here is we are it's important to note that this is a net ask of three positions, which is one more than the two that were budgeted for this year that have just not yet been hired, because we still have to go through this formal process of adding them to the staffing plan, even though they were approved as part of the budget. So the internal audit position that we had talked about, when we really looked at what the demands are on internal audit and what the needs are, particularly of the commission, what we realized was that what's needed is financial information, analysis about the state of affairs in the county, kind of an understanding of different programs. Often we'll get requests from the commission about a particular program, about costs over time, about just those kinds of analytical tasks. And we were thinking, well, our internal auditors could do that, which is true. They could, and in fact, they've done some of that work in the past. But what we really need is we need a financial analyst. And so we would like to take that internal audit position and call it a financial analyst instead. It's the same level of position. It's a very similar type of position, same type of background and skills. That person would be able to assist with, certain kinds of audit tasks as needed, but would be kind of focused on analytical tasks. And we actually think that we would like to have two of them. One that's a finance analyst and one that's a budget analyst that would work with our budget manager. So this request today is for two of those analyst positions, but just recall that one of those was already budgeted for 2020, just not added to the staffing plan. Given that position's been vacant for so long, all of these positions would be funded within the 2020 budget. There wouldn't be any need for additional funds to hire these people in 2020. But that would be a net new position and one position that was already budgeted.
So I got a question
Sure.
for you. So in looking at this, I see the audit one that is not filled, has not been filled since, the first of the year. And so what I hear you saying, though, is you want to transition that one audit position to down the line, which is a service financial budgeting analyst instead.
Yes, correct.
So take that audit off.
Yes.
And transfer that to which we have funding for that audit position.
Correct.
It just has not been filled this year.
Correct. And not only has it not been filled, it hasn't actually been added to our staffing plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And take that audit off, so you'd only have 3 auditors, which you have now.
Correct.
And then eliminate that one and put on the service financial budget analyst, which would help Rudy.
Correct.
You know, I mean, my only concern there is that I thought we were hiring Rudy to kind of fill that job. We're not even fully in a full year with him yet.
Yeah.
So it looks a little funny that we're now needing to add another on there to help him.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a year, but anyway, I can see where you're going with that. But the third one, or the second one, is this service financial officer position. Mm-hmm. And is that just like a general office specialist? What is that?
What line are you looking
I'm at
at?
the very bottom.
Where it says,
Full-time career service financial officer position.
so right in front of that says delete 1.
Oh, delete that one. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're,
So that's related to some of the other positions I'll get to, because there's a few more moving parts there. So, but just to answer your question, that last line, delete 1, full-time career service financial officer position, that is to delete our existing financial officer position.
yeah,
because,
but that moves more with the controller side
Correct.
than it does with,
Yeah.
with kind of an I thought there was an office specialist in here as well.
There's not, that's a great point, because one of the other items I'd like to address in context of this is we're looking at this as a 4-year plan as to where do we actually need to be now, and where would, if we got there now, we'd be good for many years. It's not in this agenda item, but we would like to add one office specialist position as well.
So I see it now. It's up a little further where it says add 1 full-time career service financial budget analyst position, and that would go to the controller, underneath the controller side, where this other one is the same, kind of the same position, but it would go underneath Rudy's.
Right. So we'd
Job
have
title.
two analyst positions. They'd be the same type of position. It's just one would be assigned to work on budget, and one would be assigned to work on the other finance tasks.
So the only addition to this then is just one of those positions.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I was reading it just a little bit different
Yep.
than that. But
So, yeah, so in the 2020 budget, we were approved for one of those positions that you talk about, and then a senior level accounting person. And so this request reflects kind of a restructuring of how our office is designed, where we would still add one senior level accounting person, but in this case, we're going to call it a director of financial services with a controller, and we would eliminate the existing finance officer. So the existing finance officer would serve in one of those capacities, and then we would be adding, that senior level accounting position we would call director of financial services. And then,
but on a financial basis, those all wash through except for that last one.
that's right. Yep. Yep. And then yes, to your point, we would also like to add an office specialist position. Also very important given the sort of the throughput and the bandwidth of our office. It would help to reduce the load of administrative tasks that are currently being done by finance personnel who really should be focusing their effort and attention on the core function of their job. What we've realized is we've got a bandwidth problem. We've looked and benchmarked ourselves against other counties around the state, or the state and the country, and we find that we are falling far below what could be our service to the county, to the commission, to the other departments. Historically, we've basically just kept our head not even above water, maybe right at the water level, and just sort of operating day to day, taking care of basic accounting tasks. What you haven't probably noticed historically is a monthly finance report to the commission, tracking of key performance indicators, trend analysis, quarterly reports. One of the things that we would like to do as a county is to be able to offer both, to the commission and to the public, what's called a PAFR, which is kind of more of an accessible, kind of public-friendly version of our finance statements. There's also similar things you can do with the budget. There's just a lot of things that have kind of gone undone because we've done the bare minimum, which is fine. We have really great people who work really hard. We just have not been in the business of sort of proactive long-term planning, and analysis, kind of understanding what the drivers of our costs are in the county. And a lot of that type of work is the kind of work you could do if you had some of these positions. And as we're growing, we've just looked at this is definitely what we need. So yeah, so this request today, well, discussion item really, is for a net add of essentially one position, because we've already had budgeted for this year two of those positions. So
Okay, so
So,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Commissioner. Well, I guess I'll make a little bit of an extended observation, and then correct me if you see any of this differently, Josh, or fellow commissioners. I mean, I remember in the 2019 budget cycle, I even sold public in the town halls the reason why we needed to increase the auditor's budget in many ways was, oftentimes when you are dealing with a budget issue or in business, when you come into a rapidly growing business that was founder owned, the first thing you have to do is kind of upgrade the financial function, hire the first controller or CFO. And then that normally is not the only thing that happens. That there oftentimes is an implementation of a new accounting software system so that you can really start monitoring, measuring, doing the trend analysis, all those things that you were just talking about, Josh, as things begin to scale. And we have been behind, and I've appreciated the leadership of people who have been in your department for many years and what you and Amelia have done coming in. So I think that was why a lot of the funds were approved to try to get this going. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone as fast as I would have hoped, and there's a lot of reasons for that, COVID being a huge part of it. I know that it was harder to bring on and get fully integrated, the new budget manager, when people were working remotely and in the midst of COVID-19. And also, I know that much of your staff has been inundated with new issues of administering CARES Act relief. And so those are some understandable delays, but I do think it's a priority to upgrade our systems, our processes, so that we can have way better analytics and measurement tools and performance measures in the county. And so I'm directionally supportive of this. I always have been. I think this is the best money that we can spend because, there were some areas where we still had blind spots. There were areas, for example, where I think there were many areas where all three commissioners likely would have ended up agreeing on a point of action going forward if we had all the information, but we didn't. And so I think that caused, maybe one commissioner to differ from another commissioner on how we should proceed because the financial information wasn't as clear as it could be. And we were left to kind of go with our gut in some cases. And so I support this. I have questions about how exactly I don't know how this more senior position you're asking for would report what the reporting structure is of the senior members of your department, like Rudy, and then this director of financial services, and where you're drawing the lines between kind of the budget side of the house and the finance side of the house. But I just wanted to share some of those observations.
Great. Yep, we definitely agree with those thoughts. I mean, I can quickly outline for you the hierarchy if you'd like.
And some of that may be better done in a setting where I'm just kind of reviewing organizational charts with your department, and so I don't necessarily want to put you on the spot. But if you're comfortable outlining some of that in this setting, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and in fact, it prompts me with another point that's important. So this year, the state auditor's office has promulgated a requirement for basically every government entity in the state to do a fraud risk assessment, one of the items on that, and this will be an annual report basically to the state auditor's office. One of the items on there is that is sort of whether or not you have a CPA on staff. And historically, we haven't had any positions in our office that require a CPA. And so the Director of Financial Services would become the most senior financial person in our office, and that job would require a CPA. And so what that would help us to do is to satisfy that recommendation from the state auditor's office that we have somebody with that certification. The Director of Financial Services would have the controller reporting to them. The controller would be over the accounting department. So all of the accounting personnel, accounts payable, accounts receivable, et cetera, would report to the controller, who would then report to the Director of Financial Services. In addition, the budget manager would report to the Director of Financial Services, with the budget analyst reporting to the budget director. The purchasing department would report to the Director of Financial Services. And so that's kind of an insight into how that organization would work.
Okay, that's helpful. But offline, I guess I would care a great deal then, given how you just described that, where some of the, personnel, I imagine there's some shifting that's taking place based on how you just described that.
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
we can show you kind of a diagram.
And I think that walk me through why you feel like, I think it's always great to update staffing plans. There is part of me, however, that, now there's the current budget manager who's been hired, who's getting up and running. I do actually think he needs support. I've always felt that. I feel like he's not going to be able to do his job, nor could Deneen, have done that job historically without having, I've made this comment in the past. There's probably 10 different pieces of analysis that I desperately wanted and last budget cycle and will want for this budget cycle. And I know that one person running that does not have the bandwidth to do so. So, I think they need support. In our last commission meeting, we just approved some software systems that will help do that analysis and help do some of these monthly reports. So I think we're getting there, at least with one more position or one or two. Do you feel like you will actually fill these positions? What do you feel like the pacing is? I can see a roadmap to getting there, but I think that my guess is even if all these positions were approved whenever they're on our next agenda, it's going to take some time. And I don't even know if Rudy or Deneen or whoever is going to be in some of these roles and doing the training and onboarding, if they would like to onboard everyone at once or if they would rather kind of phase that in over time.
Yeah. I think we recognize the same reality that you're recognizing, which is, it may not be possible to hire these people tomorrow. We're going to try to hire them as quickly as we can, but we want to hire the right people. But here's one data point that's kind of important. We had an experience this year where prior to COVID, we had an opening, and we sought applicants for that opening, and it was really difficult to find the right person for that particular job. And in fact, it didn't work out quite as we hoped, trying to find the right person. Well, what happened was that same position opened back up, and after the pandemic, we opened that position, and the amount of qualified and really impressive applicants was astounding. The difference between the applicants we received earlier in the year versus after the pandemic, it was just really surprising. So we kind of feel like this is a strike while the iron's hot situation where we think we could probably find really good candidates for some of these positions the sooner we're able to move forward in the hiring process. But we are very cognizant of those pressures you talk about, onboarding, but we want to hire the best people we can for these positions, and I think the sooner we start, the better off we'll be.
So Josh, with these two service financial budgeting / budgeting analysts positions that you have on there, I'm wondering if they're both equal in their need, or if one is in need more than the other. For instance, I'll just say if Rudy needs that person more than what the other is, what I would like to see is I'd like to probably see from the HR department some sort of workload calculation on what that is, because I know when we went through the process of hiring for Rudy's position, I was under the assumption that position would come in and that the support was already internally there, and that position was then going to be able to handle the needs of the analyses that we needed, and it would move. And we haven't even been a year yet, and it looks like there's a growth there. So I'm just wondering if that growth is needed and necessary, if we can document that workload and do it on both sides, because one side reports to him, the other side reports, I believe, to you. And so where those come in, is there a hierarchy on that? Is there one that comes out and says, this one, because of workload calculations, is a lot higher than the other?
Yeah, I think what we would like to do is open the position with a sort of common job description, which is why it's kind of the same position. That's two of these finance / budget analyst positions, because then we could have a pool of applicants and pick the best one, for budget related tasks and the best one for finance related tasks. I think our priority would be, if we could only hire one, we would hire the budget analyst first and then the finance analyst second. But they're basically the same position, the same types of candidates. I think could do either role. It's basically the same skill set, same job. It's just where they're assigned, whether they're assigned to budget or to finance.
Is it, and again, looking at the workload on there, is it possible for that position to have a dual role in both finance and budgeting?
Well, I think if we hired one nice thing is if there's a lot of good candidates, then you can hire two of the candidates from your pool and fill both the positions, rather than going through the process and hiring one and hiring another. In terms of workload, I think there's actually plenty of workload. Our office, so one of the things is our internal auditors have often been kind of leaned on to help departments with financial analysis. That's pretty important to kind of reconcile. There's basically what I'm saying is there's miscellaneous finance tasks that get put on our plate that are not part of our routine job. It's not part of preparing annual finance statements, or part of preparing the annual budget, or part of managing the accounting of the county. But it's an important finance task that somebody has to do, and there's nobody to do it. We don't have the staff or the bandwidth to sort of do those kinds of tasks. Research projects about what something costs in the county. And so we really desperately need people who can do that type of work. Often we've leaned on our internal auditors to do that type of work, and that's at the cost of sort of routine internal audit work. So that's why we feel these two positions are really important. Budget's going to be able to help provide you with the kind of financial intel that you need on an ongoing basis throughout the year prior to budget season, so that you get to budget season, you're not surprised about anything, and you're kind of well apprised of the situation of the county's finances. So I think that's how I kind of characterize that issue. Certainly if we hired one of those analysts, they would do some budget analyst work, and if there were some other analyst projects, we'd give them to them as well. I don't know how much bandwidth they would have to do that, so they'd probably have to prioritize and juggle between budget work and finance work. But I think ideally we'd have two of those positions.
But HR could go through a process like that, right, and do a workload calculation on that and do a determination.
Yeah, we can, working with Josh, we can look into it, we can establish how much time we need over the course of the year.
That'd be helpful. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, I don't have any more questions. It's a helpful discussion.
Nothing for me.
Okay. Okay, moving to item number 2, Commissioner Lee, you might be there in the room. I had a question of whether this was just accidentally placed on the work session agenda.
No, this was asked to be placed onto the work session agenda when it first came up. It's been some time. I don't even know how long it's been. Originally, we had discussion as a commission on it. We asked that it go on a work session. In talking with Dave, we were gonna have Dave, talk, with the Treasury Department and bring this forward on a work session so that we could have some understanding on what the process is when it comes to, uncollectibles and sell and so forth, or whatever the case may be with it. In this case, it's uncollectibles. And this has been some time ago, so I'm trying to remind you of that conversation that we had where we said we need to probably understand that a little bit better as they come up with uncollectible. And the reason why was there was some questions that we had where it's not necessarily tied to a business and the business closure. We have serial numbers on equipment. They're tied to equipment specific. If that equipment is sold, it still follows that equipment going to whoever purchased that equipment. And so we wanted to know what processes were that they went through to to see all of the different aspects of it. And that was the reason why it came back on our agenda, and we asked for it to come back on a commission or on a work session to have that conversation.
Okay, well, let's turn to that item.
Hey, I'm Jeannie Bowen, and I'm from the Treasurer's Office to help answer some questions. So to kind of even go over the process of how we write off and how we pick businesses, as we are trying to collect, a lot of these businesses were then like looking online to see if online it even says it is. If we can, if they're closed, then we're letting the assessor's office know, or even the assessor's office is coming up with a lot of these. They have a couple people who actually will go out to the site. They will call the city. We will, even Google will often say whether or not it's closed. We're looking on BES, Business Entity Search, that's the state site. So we usually have multiple ways to verify before we decide it's closed. As for the equipment, it's very difficult to track because most people, when they're uploading their equipment list, are not uploading serial numbers, right? So they're saying, I have a desk, a chair, a table. We don't have a way to then see who took that over. And when a lot of times the business is completely gone, we don't even have a contact of someone to, if we're calling, they're like, hey, I was just an employee. I don't know what happened to anything, so. Is there a specific business that we are looking at?
Well, I just, when I look down through there, sometimes I see, and I wonder, is it out of business? And I know we contact the cities and find out. And we even found one, and I was educated last time on it, where they crossed the county line, and so we can't go after them because they cross the county line. But yet there are times when we've had in the past where we see a business that went out of business, but we know that they sold the entity to another entity, and so their equipment and everything was sold. And so I just want to know the process that we go through for that. I don't want to be chasing, dimes, or anything of that
Right.
nature to a certain extent. But I'm concerned that there are times when businesses show up on there. And
Right, so like last time we had Zango and
Zanga,
Zija, right?
yeah, right.
The assessor's office went out multiple times and was like, hey, you guys bought this, and they kept denying, we cannot prove because we don't have serial numbers tied to things.
So without serial numbers, so I'm confused about that. If they don't list serial numbers on, I can't imagine them putting serial numbers on desks or anything of that nature, but on
On a
equipment,
computer?
maybe on computers or on bigger equipment, I would assume that they would probably, or we would insist that they put serial
And
numbers
in their
down.
internal things, they might have serial numbers. Like we have numbers, right, on a lot of our equipment, but it is not required for them to upload that number.
It's not? Oh. Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, so this, I appreciate you bringing this up, Commissioner Lee. I have I kind of have the same question, which is, I mean, let's take an example of a business that's actually on this paper. Best Buy.
Okay, so this is Best Buy Appliance, not Best Buy. They are the small
Okay.
little dinky place on State Street going, in Orem, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's helpful.
Yes.
Because I do remember last time there was a couple of big companies. And I think what I saw was that maybe one location shut down, but the business did not shut down. And the parent companies should still be liable for that tax obligation,
Yes.
right? So, like, would you agree? So, let's imagine this was the larger Best Buy, and there was a store closure in our county. Just because the particular store closed, that does not mean that we should call that account uncollectible.
Agreed.
Okay, so that was one point, and then I guess the other point goes along with what Commissioner Lee was saying, which is a successor business. If indeed, and maybe civil attorneys can kind of opine on this, but if we know that, I mean, first of all, if they bought the stock or they merged with one of these companies, they inherit all tax obligations. So they are on the hook. I don't understand why we should have to prove that, they have certain serial numbers.
Um,
Well, this is Dave Shawcroft. I could maybe add a little there that, for instance, if there's a bulk sale of all equipment and all assets are transferred to a new entity, then that lien of the personal property tax would follow that equipment into the hands of the new company. But as far as collecting it from the company itself, it is collected through the lien on the personal property. So we would have to seize and sell the personal property to collect that personal property tax.
And this is Paul Jones, just to add a point.
So that's interesting.
It is the county's obligation to prove that the property does exist, and that it existed with the company on, January 1 of that tax year. So it is our job to, be able to identify those properties as of January 1. And sometimes we don't find out that the property's gone until after January 1, which is why we end up with this list.
Well, I'm going to counter that a little bit. Is it our responsibility to prove that it exists when they list it, and they're listing it as an asset? And if they're listing it as an asset, then wouldn't it be their responsibility to prove that it was sold? And if it was sold, who was it sold to, or that it was discarded and put into the junk pile? It seems like that would be their responsibility, not ours.
Yeah, so I guess maybe a point of clarification would be helpful. And Jeannie, you can help with this. Did these companies fill out forms for these years? Like, did Twin Labs fill out a 2019 form?
I only actually have a form back from, I believe, one business, Wasatch Satellite.
Yeah, so most of the time, we're actually assessing that tax because we've assessed it for years.
So we're just
and-
estimating them?
A lot of them are estimated, like Carter
Yeah.
Electric was estimated all those years. So who's to even say what they honestly had to begin with?
It's difficult because they don't fill out the
interesting.
form, but we estimate it, or they filled it out in years past. And so we know what they had maybe in 2016 or 2015, and it comes to 2019, we have to estimate it. So they didn't necessarily tell us that they had this equipment for these years. They were estimated. And so it is,
They probably paid it in the past.
right, yeah, they paid it in
So-
the past.
Okay, but explain that standard to me. Maybe it's not, but it sounds like there's a little bit of a different standard, because assuming there was no closure, assuming there was no asset sale or merger, a company doesn't get to just come in and say, we don't actually have that equipment. right? I mean, once the bill, they can do that for future years, but they're on the hook for the assessed personal property tax
Well, if they're a going
in the years
concern,
assessed.
yes, sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah.
If they're a going concern and they get estimated, then you're right. They can't come in and then dispute that, because the rules state that if it's their job to provide us with an equipment list, and then if they don't, they're gonna get estimated, and then they gotta pay the tax that they get estimated on. But they could come in at any time before that and tell us they don't have any equipment. They could do that. You know, they can amend their equipment sheet timely and tell us they don't have anything, and then we wouldn't tax them unless there was an audit
Sure.
performed.
Sure. Okay, so let's just use that scenario. I forget when these go out, but they missed the deadline to timely tell you that they don't have any equipment
May
So it's a
15th,
set.
yes.
on May 15th. And then it's due, what, in November?
Then they are billed randomly throughout the summer.
Okay. They're billed randomly throughout the summer. And in that same year, someone transfers their company to someone else. Why should that change our standard for being, I don't think that should trigger any new rule on our side. We are owed the same amount of personal property taxes we were owed before they sold that.
Yeah,
equipment
so
or that
they,
business.
and that would be, right? So if they sold it and they let us know that they sold it and not closed, that tax is still owing and the new owner has to pay it or go after the old owner.
So there's an interesting one on here, Oregano Kitchen. We know they moved, and they moved over to another location in Provo, into the same location here in Provo. But it says uncollectible. So it's the same ownership. I don't know if they changed their name, or I don't know if there's a process different with that. But why is that tax being uncollectible when that business is still in our valley?
I had been told that Oregano had closed. Where are they located? Are they in Provo?
They did, and then they moved over to another location and went to a different name. I can't remember the name of that location over there. And now they've moved from that location back to the original one under a different name,
But it's the same owner?
same owner.
That's not correct. They went out of business.
That's what I had
There was a
thought.
partner who decided to close the business, and as I understand it, was the majority partner, at least the financing partner, decided to shut it down. And so the minority partner then decided to go start a different restaurant somewhere else.
Oh, okay. So that's what I don't. All I know is that the entity was there, and the owner, professed owner. Well, I don't know if there was a silent. I don't know any of the details of that.
Yeah.
But then they moved to a different location, and now they've moved back under a different name. And so I just don't know how all those things transfer through. I mean, who is responsible for the payment of that tax?
So if the new owner is willing to say that they actually have that same equipment, is this the one that had the fire?
No, I don't think so.
Then, I mean, but we need them to specify that they own that equipment,
Or they sold it.
or that they sold it, right? And so we
Yeah.
tried to contact people to find out what happened to the equipment, but sometimes, I mean, I guess we have to decide how much work we want to put in, how many hours, how many miles, how many.
Well, I think the
hunt it
minority
down.
owner should know. I mean, being a part of the business.
Yeah, I mean, you got the lawyer here, but the legal entity known as Oregano Italian Kitchen is no longer. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
So,
And so for us to create new accounts, they are like pulling lists from the cities, right? To say, oh, there's this new business. We don't have any name in our system for this. So they're creating a new account. So as we're seeing Oregano's closed, and, you know, we probably couldn't reach anyone, saw the business was gone, things like that. The new owner of this new name, we're not always going to realize that's the exact equipment and things like that.
Okay.
So the only, for future way down the road, Salt Lake does it very different than we do. They actually have like a team of like 35 people where they actually are out in the field at least 3 to 4 times a week to go, and they actually have a relationship. And so the moment a business is moving, they are knowing when it's moving, if the new owner's coming in, buying equipment, and they're very, I mean, we obviously can't afford like that quite, you know, that's a lot, but to track all of the businesses here in Utah County would probably be a lot more people.
Right? I agree. And I'll just tell you, as a past business owner, I hated this tax. I just hated it all the way through. It just drove me crazy all the time. Pay sales tax on purchasing the equipment and then pay personal property. Anyway. I
And
can
we
go on
are
and
trying
on
to
about
push
that.
it away, right? I mean, like Chris goes up and they try bumping the limit up, and we're trying to get away from home-based businesses because they're small, and
Yeah.
trying to slowly
Yeah, and I
get rid of
appreciate
the.
that we're doing that, and we're not going after some of those smaller ones where they have a computer and a desk and that's all they have there, and then they get assessed because they look like they're a bigger company because they put that out there. But anyway, it's I just want to make sure that the opportunity there, or it's equal enough, so that you've got some businesses who are paying, and some businesses that transfer and they say, yeah, we sold that property, therefore we pay the tax, and others who are maybe not. And it really bugs me that you can move across the county line and say, sorry, don't have to go there, don't have to pay that. That seems kind of weird to me on a state basis. But I just wanted to know what the process was, you know, going forward with it, and that we're being as equal as possible with all, and that it does transfer through, even to if it's sold or if it's you know, taken to another location, that there's still a lien basically on that property.
Chris Polson, County Assessor. I appreciate that. As been stated, Salt Lake takes a much more aggressive approach than we do, and it costs them quite a bit more. In fact, all of our audits are done by the State Tax Commission. Salt Lake is exempted from having them do that, and they're actually doing their own investigations and audits. So they do have a staff of 35, where we have a staff of about 5. We're constantly in discovery. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 20% of businesses that start out don't make it through the second year. And by the time you get to year 5, about half, 50%, no longer exist. So my staff is constantly in the discovery process. And when something that they hear about opens up somewhere else, they are on the phone and they're trying to determine, did you shift that equipment or did you remove it, and is it just gone? I mean, what happened? It may still be sitting in the location they left. A lot of times when a new lease comes up, it's a completely different business. And so that equipment just disappears. Just to give you an example of the scope of what we're talking about, though, 7% of our revenue comes from personal property. Of that 7%, 6% of the 7% comes from the larger businesses. That leaves 1% for the smaller businesses. Over half of our accounts are exempt. And so you're going to see a lot of little stuff on that report because they don't request the exemption, and then we have to estimate and go forward. There's a conversation about estimations. We have to estimate. It's required by law that if they do not respond, we have to estimate whether they exist or not until we can figure out what's going on. And they only are in communication with us once a year. Running a business is a dynamic effort. And because it's dynamic, they can go out of business at any point in time, and they can have things switching from company or entity back and forth multiple times within the year. So they only have to report what's there as of January 1st of each year. And so we have this small window. And because that staff is constantly trying to discover where is that equipment? Did you bring it with you? Did you not? Did you acquire it? Where did you purchase your equipment from? So they are trying to locate a link between accounts. But it's a process that doesn't have a high success rate. So.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions we can answer for you guys?
All right, thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying to pull up this next agenda item. Move to item number 3, an introduction to the vaccine scheduler.
Hi, my name is Patrick Warrow, the Information Systems Director. I'm here with Eric Edwards from the Health Department. In fact, I'm going to turn the time initially over to him. He's going to talk about this project that we've been really excited to collaborate on, and he's going to talk about the basic need, and then I'll tell you about the solution application that we've developed so far.
All right, Commissioners, thanks for your time. Eric Edwards, Utah County Health Department. You know, with COVID, obviously, so many unique challenges have been presented to every single department here in the county and throughout really every aspect of society. One of the unique things that I realized early on with this is that we were probably going down the same road that we went with on H1N1, if you remember back to 2009 with the swine flu epidemic. Pandemic, actually. For those of you that came to get your shot, your swine flu shot, probably in the first few weeks experienced that, you know, the huge long lines, the frustrations of the supply and demand needs, and it just wasn't well coordinated because we weren't prepared at that point for anything like that. Hadn't experienced it before. And so we, back in like March, started to receive instruction that a vaccine was likely going to be produced, when it would be arriving, had no idea. And so in April, received instruction from the State Health Department to start preparing for the eventual arrival of a vaccine for COVID-19. So one of the things that we learned back in the with swine flu was the need to have some way of organizing appointments for individuals so that they could come and receive in a systematic way, rather than having like the Disneyland line effect, which so many people had experienced early on. With swine flu, H1N1, we started using an app that was available, or an application, a web-based application, so that people would schedule to come to receive their vaccine. And that controlled the amount of people coming based on how many staff we had to provide the vaccine. And that worked for us, but it didn't work perfect because it wasn't integrated with our system, and it wasn't perfectly fitting the needs that our nurses in family and personal health had to accomplish that. So COVID-19 also has another unique challenge, and that is the need to also maintain physical distancing needs, right? So 6 feet separation as people are standing in line, and so all of these we were hoping to develop some type of an online tool. So I contacted IT, and this has been a joint project ever since, starting in June, in working with them. Some other challenges are also, we know that when this vaccine arrives, we're first going to have to vaccinate priority populations before a large-scale vaccination for the general public. I've mentioned this. I don't want to be repetitive, but this is the need. This is what we're trying to meet with this project: is a web-based application that facilitates the ability for us to schedule our own vaccination events, and allowing people to register to to and select the events available in their geographic area within the county, making it as convenient and to distribute vaccine as efficiently as possible, as safely as possible. Those are like the three-pronged approach that we have to meet. So as far as the actual application itself, and I'll let Patrick go ahead and talk about the technology stuff that's over my head. So Patrick?
Thanks. So as Eric mentioned, when he approached us, we talked about a lot of different COVID projects that we could do. This one clearly stood out as about as classic of a CARES Act project that I could even imagine. And the interesting thing here is we looked around the marketplace for anything like this. We looked at neighboring communities, and no one seems to be getting prepared for how they're going to systematically distribute these vaccinations, which was a bit alarming. So we were very excited to help, but our goal was to create something that was so easy and intuitive to use, but flexible enough that we could design it for different types of events or different locations or different times. This is the first screen, this is the first screen of the administration. There's two parts of this application. There's an administrative side and a user side. The administrator side is the side that the health department uses to set up events like a vaccine. Maybe they were doing it here at the Health and Justice Building, or maybe they're having a session at a local high school or something like that. What we expect to happen is that there will be lots of events in different places, often at the same time. This is a view of 4 different events that have been at different stages of being set up. If you look closely, you'll see a little yellow tab in the lower right corner of each of those boxes. That, in this case, you can see the first 2 are yellow and it says flu. We've actually already begun testing this application in a real way. Any county employee last week were able to register to get their first flu shot of the year using this application, because we wanted to test out its capability and performance. So this first 2 say flu. The red one would be like I can't read it from here, but I'm guessing
Test.
it's a test. Okay, but when it's time to actually do the COVID test, it'll be COVID there. So you can see I'm going to go get my COVID test. I'm going to skip through some of this just because we kind of talked a lot about it already, but this allows the administrators to choose a location. And the most important part that their previous application wasn't allowing them to do was to set a capacity rate. And this is really important because only the health department knows how many nurses are available at a certain time. And every vaccination or event has a different flow pacing. In this case, let's hypothetically say you could do 20, they assume they could do 20 vaccinations every 15 minutes. They set that capacity, it creates a block. And that allows, as those fill up, that allows the health department flexibility to know when they need staff where and for how long. It empowers the patients by giving them lots of options. You'll see when we show you the actual sign-in sheets, patients or users would be able to type in their zip code, and it'll first list the ones that are closest to them, and they can make it bigger. They don't have to use a zip code. They can just say the county and see them all if they want. But it really allows them to easily pick and choose the location and time that works best for them. Also, extremely important is they don't have to call. We don't have to answer the phone. We don't have to use staff up to do that. They can do this all online. They can use their phone. They can use their computer. They don't have to come in contact with anyone to make this appointment at all until it's time to actually come in and get their shot. They can choose members of their family. They tell us how many they need to come, and then immediately start filling up the blocks. Once those slots are filled, that event becomes closed, and you'll see an example here in a minute. All right, so here's two options you could choose from the user side. Once they've given us the type of service they're looking for, say COVID, and a location, it starts showing them the time frames. And these are like in 15-minute blocks. And you'll notice, if you look carefully at those little gray blocks on the side, the first two are full because all the slots were already taken. And then it tells you how many slots are still open. So say you had a family of 5, but there was a slot that only had 4. Well, you wouldn't choose that one. You would choose the one that had at least the 5 that you were looking for. Once you choose it, it immediately comes off. It's like buying a seat at the movie theater. Once they've chosen and given us their identification information, a confirmation email and text will come to them. It'll reiterate when they're scheduled to come. It will put a code on there for them. They will need to print this out or show it on their phone when they arrive to show that this is them, and probably some personal identification so that they're not taking someone else's slot. Because this is all pre-filled out and they've already entered in all their information, it really speeds up the process for the health department. It only takes seconds to look at that paper and compare it to the list, the roster they have, and no longer do you have to come in and have them fill out a form over at the side table or anything like that. They've already done all that. So the idea here is that we don't have groups of people. Pretty much as soon as you arrive, you're going to be ushered in the next few minutes, which is what we're after. Person would put in their names and the ages of everybody, and a contact email address, and a phone number, although we didn't show it here, a phone number if they want to receive text reminders. Okay. One thing that's kind of really important to remember, when we started this project, and even now, there's so much we still don't know about how we're going to have to actually distribute it, and to who first, and to what type of qualifications or characterizations that we need to track. But we've built a system that we can easily add those pieces. Like say, you say you're a healthcare worker, so you need to be in the phase 1. Well, we can start tracking that very easily by adding another field. Let me just kind of move on before I go there. Keep in mind that what we know now is that likely people will need to receive 2 vaccinations. That's really important because we need to track several things about those vaccinations. For instance, you can't come and get a vaccination with the Moderna vaccine and then next time sign up for one for the Pfizer one, because your booster needs to be the same one twice. So we have to keep track of that, and we can keep track of that. Not only that, you get your second vaccine between 20 and 28 days, at least that's what they're telling us right now. We can build in those variable parameters if they change. But what's really important is that once people come in and sign up for their original and then show up and get their shot, that they're immediately notified to sign up for their next one so they can get it within that period of time as fast as they need to. So we're building a notification system that will send emails and texts and reminding them, hey, remember you have your appointment. Or perhaps they didn't show up for their appointment. We can notify them, hey, we're sorry you missed your appointment. Do you want to schedule another one? Open it up and look at your options. Or, hey, thanks for coming in for your first vaccine. When do you want to come for your next one? Because likely we'll already have them scheduled, making it easy and painless for everyone who wants to get the vaccine to get it. So that's really kind of what we're after. We have a couple of things we're still working out. For instance, we're really concerned about, and it's hard to predict. I don't know that anyone can really accurately predict, but what the demand will be once a vaccine is available to the general population. We're a little concerned that if 200,000 or 300,000 people try to log on at the same time. They could crash our website. So we're actually building a database in Oracle Cloud to allow us to protect the rest of our functions. Doesn't do us a whole lot of good to create a really cool, slick application if the web page crashes because too many people are trying to get to it. So that we're working out with Oracle right now, and the text messaging part, working out with a company called Twilio. And so those are things that we expect to come online in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, we've been able to do one test that Eric will talk about, and we're going to do several others. Hopefully, by the time November rolls around or whenever this first wave comes, that we're way ahead of the curve. Because we know that even today, we have a functioning application right now. And I'm not sure many other health departments can say that. And I can only say this is because of the leadership of Eric and the health department, that they saw that this was an issue that we needed to be prepared for. So we're happy to be part of it. I'm going to turn the time over to Eric to talk about a couple of more things, and then we'll both be available for questions.
Okay, not too much more time needed to discuss this, but we did do a soft launch of this last week. As a lot of you knew, an email went out to all department employees asking if they would like to receive a flu shot. Utilizing the new system, we wanted to do an employee launch before we did a public-facing launch, just to make sure that we had a lot of the bugs worked out. On the first day, we were able to have 56 individuals register through the system successfully and receive their vaccinate, show up and actually get vaccinated, and then 72 on Thursday. And some of the lessons learned from that is not a lot of bugs, but one issue was browser related. For whatever reason, anybody using anything other than Chrome, it didn't work as well. And I believe those issues have been resolved by the development team. Chrome worked best. And I think Firefox and also Safari weren't as rapid and was frustrating for people. I think also individuals that weren't on the county network, it was faster for those on the county network than it was for people that were off-site, doing it from their phone at home or something like that, using their own Wi-Fi. That's been fixed. So that was important. I'm glad we worked that out before doing this and frustrating we unfortunately had to frustrate employees before we frustrated the public. So anyway, our next steps, we hope to do a large-scale community event. We do have one scheduled for the public coming up in like a week to test with flu. And then we would like to do a drive-through flu exercise at some location here in the valley. Last year we did it at the Lone Peak location, a drive-through flu. This year, with people just showing up, this year we'd like to do it with the scheduler to test it in the Spanish Fork area, South County, since we did it in North County last year. But doing this, I don't think we can test it enough so that we truly can be prepared for whatever's to come with the eventual arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine. So a lot of individuals have helped to bring this together. So a big thanks to the IT team, to Drew, Lucas, Avery, Bert, Mike, Jerry, Patrick. They've brought up new functionality. Just in hearing us talk about our planning efforts, they come up with technology solutions that we as public health professionals wouldn't have thought of. So it's been a really good opportunity to kind of work across our IT/public health lines and work together on this. And also Aislinn, Nancy, Melissa, and Rebecca from my shop helping with this. But we really want to thank IT. They're the ones that have built the solution for us. We're excited to test it out, and we're confident that it will ultimately help us serve the public better when we do this large-scale vaccination in the future. Do you have any questions for us? I hope that gives you an idea of the intent, the need, and what we're trying to build to meet that need.
My only question is, because everyone comes on time, you don't have a problem with them when they get there, I'm sure. But
Everyone comes on
What
time, yeah.
happens, it looked like there was 10-minute intervals in there. But what happens when somebody comes and they're scheduled from 9 to 9:10, but they come at 9:10? There's a bunch of them. Does it start to back up, or how do you work through that?
In fact, this even happened with people arriving early. We even had some people just show up without registering for the employee one. That was a really good real-world example of what we're going to see when the public. You're right. We will have people just show up. We'll have to plan for that and build for that. And the beauty of this system is Nancy or whoever's serving as the admin. It depends on how they set up their event. An event in Saratoga, they might have 3 nurses able to do 5 people every 15 minutes, or I'm just making this ratio up.
Right.
And then here at the health department, maybe they have the capacity to have 45 people every 10 minutes because they have a bigger group going through the auditorium. And so they're able to adjust for that and realize that some people aren't going to show.
Right.
It probably will even out. Some people will bring more people than they registered for. A larger family, a single person registers, and they might fail to say, oh, and I have 4 children, and so 5 additional people. That will happen, but we will learn as we go too, and they can change in the admin setting how they plan for that. So this is scalable, and it's customizable and flexible enough to meet our needs based on how they built it for us. And
That's what's nice about it is that you can actually go in there and say, you know what, we're going to have to build in a 20-minute flex time in there to just kind of make up the difference and then kind of reset and start again.
That's right. And also this texting tool I'm excited about because we can also let people know, I believe, if the functionality works out, that we can actually, if for whatever reason, heaven forbid, maybe the vaccine's bad or something and we have to cancel an event, we can let people know the same day through the texting option and the email. Or we can modify it and let people know that there's a lag time or through the communication process. But for reminders and for other notifications, this will allow us to do that where we weren't with the tool that we had that didn't quite meet our needs back in 2009. One last point that I don't think I really was able to also explain is I think we can also leverage this tool in the future for other purposes. I don't think, while this is being built for COVID-19, when this pandemic is over, I can't wait for that day, but when it's over, I see us being able to use this to schedule other events at the health department and create opportunities to use this tool on our new website so that we can accomplish transactions on our website so that people don't have to call up somebody and utilize staff time to schedule them arriving to or participating in one of our many activities or classes, or we can use this tool. We just what is that QVC commercial? Set it and forget it, But that'll help us be more efficient, save staff time, and hopefully everybody is accomplishing things on their phones these days. This is a mobile-friendly tool, and so it's built to work. I think 9 out of 10 people aren't going to schedule this on a desktop. It'll be on their iPad or most likely their phone. So it's built to be mobile-friendly for both on the admin side. They're developing that, but it's already mobile-friendly for the user side, for the public. So any other questions?
Me.
All right.
Just I have a comment. And then one question.
Okay.
Just great work. I've already heard somehow, I'm not sure how they heard, but from another county who got wind that we have some great fancy tool and wanting to learn about it. So great work. The question just kind of builds on your point about leveraging this. I know that a couple of our assessing and collecting departments, and certainly kind of our clerk auditor's office, have been brainstorming about what is the most, and some of this is COVID driven and some of it's just trying to be efficient and good managers of how can we better utilize our administrative building and our staff and better serve the public. And, one of the ideas is kind of having more of a centralized queue system for the public to come in, take a number or, enter into a system like this, what they're here to do. And instead of having to be pushed all over the building, once it's kind of clear what they're here for, the staff comes to them, or they're directed to one or two kind of clear public-facing locations. And so it sounds like, Patrick, this system may have some of the basic building blocks for a queue system like that.
Absolutely. We tried to build this as flexible as we could. I could absolutely see us scaling it into a general appointment scheduler for the county. We could definitely do that. Especially with the tools based with the text notifications, I think that is a great way for real-time feedback. Also, a two-way feedback to people who are looking to make appointments and not sure, about the flexibility there.
All right, great work. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to our final item, which is another staffing discussion, this on the other side of the house, on the election side. I assume it's Josh Daniels there again to speak.
Correct. Yep, Josh Daniels from the Clerk Auditor's office here. So this particular election year is unique, obviously, for a number of reasons, but the one that's primary in our mind right now is the pandemic. The state legislature has met 2 different times in special session this year to pass 2 different bills changing some of the election laws for this year in particular in order to respond to the pandemic. So some of those changes in law have created unforeseen work burdens on our office as we go into the general election. And it's become clear that as we go into the final weeks here of 2020 and gear up for the November election, we need some specific staff dedicated to help respond to some of those demands. And so this item is a request for 4 full-time, albeit temporary employees, funded, grant funded is the sort of the HR term, but they'd be funded by CARES Act funds. And what they would be doing is they would be tasked with various public services that are required and that have sort of arisen because of the pandemic. So that's what the 4 full-time grant-funded COVID response service clerks are. Those would be basically hired as soon as we could, as soon as we had authorization to do so, and then they would work through the end of the election period in about mid-November. The estimated cost there is the high end. That's if all 4 are hired essentially at the same time and are able to work, 40 hours a week for the entirety of that period of time. Any questions about those?
No, Josh, I appreciate, we've had conversation before on this one, and the election process, especially in the climate that we're at right now, we can't misstep. And so I think it's important, and I appreciate the conversation we had, basically just talking about how we're right up against the edges of some of the temps that we have now, and we can't go over on that. If we do, because of the CARES Act, we'll find ourselves paying for benefits as well. So I see this as a need, and a need that, to make sure that we keep this process whole. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to the commission for all you've done to help put us in a good position this year. I think we really are in a good position heading into the election. I don't have any significant concerns that we don't already have a mitigation plan for, but this is one that we've identified pretty critical. So.
All right, thank you. With that concludes our work session topics today. And is there any other comment before we adjourn?
Nope.
Nope. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn.